Well, welcome everyone. I can see lots of connecting to audio signs up. So while people are joining, we'll just give people a moment. Fab, welcome, welcome. Make yourself comfortable. Okay, lots of names I recognize this time. So lots who have been with us before. So welcome, whether you've attended one of these webinars before or whether this is brand new to you, welcome. So we will just give people a moment to join. We still have lots of connecting audio dots going on. So do remember that the webinar today is recorded. So if you would like to remain anonymous as you ask a question at the end, you can always use the chat box. And if you'd like to ask a question anyway over audio, you can just turn off your camera and change your name to anonymous if you'd like to remain anonymous. Otherwise, we'd love to see your bubbling, bright-eyed faces as you ask questions. So we are joined by Danny Blythe today. Danny is well known to many of us. He's of course well known for co-authoring the book Chinese Dietary Wisdom. He is a wonderful familiar face for anybody who was based at the College of Integrated Chinese Medicine or who's taken possibly CPD days with Danny. So it's a wonderful pleasure to have Danny with us today. Over the weekend, the BXC did receive news of the passing of Hugh Macpherson over the weekend. So on behalf of the BXC, we would just like to offer our condolences for anybody who was close to Hugh, anybody who knew him. Our thoughts and prayers are with you all. Hugh did impact the acupuncture world in many ways through research and through disseminating his knowledge, and so he didn't just make effects to those close to him. He really changed things for a lot of us, and so for that reason we're really saddened to hear of his passing. Today we're joined by Danny, so without further ado, I'll be handing over to you. Feel free to type questions into the chat box as we go, or raise your hand through the participants box towards the end of the talk, and Danny will be taking questions at the end. So, Danny, over to you.
Thank you, Alan. Yes, thank you for joining in. It's very sad to hear the news about Hugh, and I don't think there's many acupuncturists who haven't been sort of touched by his lectures or his work in some way. So that's very sad news. And thank you for inviting me here. I'll see if I can share my screen. The lecture's called Feeding the Center and Emptying the Mind, and the how this came to be was Alan asked me to do a lecture, and he said, what would you like to do? And I said, well, I don't really know. What do you want me to do? And he said, well, some nutrition stuff would be good. And then I had an email from him the day before it went out to copy, and he said, oh yeah, and by the way, it's the theme's about anxiety. And I was in the middle of a clinic day, so I said, well, come up with a good title for me, and I'll build it around that, and it'll stop me just kind of rehashing some old PowerPoints I've got, and it'll make me think about something different. And he came up with something great, which was feeding the center and emptying the mind. And the origins of this are the Tao Te Ching chapter 3, which is empty the mind and fill the belly. And it's important when it's got the number 3 in it, because of course 3 is the number of Qi. So if 1 is the number of the Tao and of nothingness, and 2 is polarity and the yin and yang, 3 is all the good stuff, so like humanity and Qi. And we see some familiar emptying. This is empty and full. This is our characters that we think of as deficiency and fullness. And this phrase, I had a look at some commentaries, and they talk about in terms of the government, like in Ling Shu chapter 8, how we talk about the organs as being different officials. That there's this idea of the government keeping the people quiet and well nourished. In Tai Chi and Qigong, we think of emptying the mind and filling the belly as like breathing practice, so focusing on our abdomens and bringing our mind down to our lower dantian. So empty the mind and filling the belly has this idea of mindfulness. In Yangsheng, it's about keeping the mind calm and strengthening the digestive system. And in morals, about sort of quieting desires and focusing on the basic stuff. And it's a really good reminder for me about Yangsheng and keeping in the big picture. And I'm going to do my best to try and keep in the big picture today. So a bit of background on that. The content, it's only a short chapter. I'm not going to bore you too long with this, but not putting special importance on excelling brings about that people are not quarrelsome. Not having expensive and difficult to acquire things brings about that people do not rob. Not seeing desirable things brings about that the heart and mind is not chaotic. Therefore, the governing of the sage is to empty the mind and fill the belly, to weaken the jaw and strengthen the bones. So this is really interesting, or is to me. This character for managing or governing that the sage does is character for water and to carry or return. So this is also the character that we use for treating. It's like getting everything back in its correct channel. So when we do a treatment, that's the character that's used. The heart, well, we know about the heart. There's the heart here rather than the shen, and the belly being the whole digestive system, really. So it's a sort of generic term for the digestive system. To weaken the jaw, weaken is like the wings of a bird, so like to make delicate or to make it frail, to make it small. And the jaw is usually translated as will, but it's actually, I always think of it as what the mind is on. So it can mean like drive or willpower. It can also be a general term for the interchangeable with the shen. So we can talk about the five jaw. It also can mean like our memory. So whatever our mind is sort of focusing on at the time. And to strengthen the bones. So an insect with a hard shell. So to again, this image of our kind of spirit being peaceful and our bodies being strong. This always brings about that people are without knowing and without craving. Again, this sounds a bit like sort of, tyrannical governing, until we think that without knowing is used in Buddhism and Taoism as like a childlike mind, without focusing on all the busyness. People who know do not dare to act. If you do without doing, then nothing is not governed. And do without doing, this great Wei Wu Wei, that like effortless doing that we focus on in Tai Chi. And again, if we do without doing, if we're spontaneous, then nothing is not done or treated or kept in its right path. Anyway, enough of that. But thank you, Alan, for the title. That gave me lots to think about. So, if we think in the most basic way about spirit, qi and jing, I always think of like the balance between these things with qi at the center of it. If we think of at the shen level of an excess being anxiety, or too much energy on that level being anxiety or overthinking or worry or whatever it is, and a deficiency being depression or lack of engagement. At the qi level, an excess is greed, and a deficiency is lack of appetite and poor assimilation and weak digestion. And then at the jing level, the deficiency being everything from a lack of fertility or a lack of reserve through to invent a word and do a terrible thing, being under incarnated, to not really be here on the physical realm. So we can see things in Yangsheng, very simple terms, just in terms of these, and the interaction between the three of them. So we've all experienced like greed in the evening and overeating in the evening, disturbing the Shen at night and leading to insomnia. So these three things are really tied up together. So Yang Sheng, nurturing or nourishing life, and I think of this in various ways. I think of this really as being all the stuff that we do in our clinic rooms that doesn't involve sticking needles in or cups on or herbs. So all the other really important stuff, which I think is just as important, if not more so, than the treatment we do, for me falls under Yang Shen. So this is diet and eating habits. This is the balance of sleep and rest. Exercise, I'd say Qigong and Neigong because that's what I do, and what I teach my patients. But I think nothing wrong with a good bit of jogging or swimming or whatever it is. Meditation and mindfulness, creativity and purpose, and socializing and culture. So all of the other stuff. So I thought what we could do in this little session today is I could wax lyrical for a while about these two, diet and sleeping. We could maybe do some stuff together around exercise and meditation, and then in the questions you can tell me about all of this complicated stuff here. Does that sound like a reasonable deal, Alan? Yeah, got the thumbs up from Alan. So diet and eating habits, I'm going to whiz through some fundamentals very quickly. We understand foods by the 4 qi is basically yin and yang, and the 5 flavors. Obviously we've got our 5 flavors, and this is going right back to Han Dynasty, classical Chinese medicine. We also understand foods a little bit by the channels, but this is much later. This is like Yuan Dynasty. This is much later addition. So the fundamentals of understanding food is by its temperature and its flavor, and to some degree by its nature. There's some other things like thin and thick and heavy and light. And I always teach digestion like cooking soup. So the stomach and small intestine are like the saucepan. This is where it all happens. The stomach yin is like your cooking sauce. I hope you're appreciating this very fancy PowerPoint. Things flying in here. The spleen, qi and yang is like the cooking process, like everything, the digestion process that happens in the stomach and small intestine. The kidney yang is like the flame, the spark. The liver and gallbladder are like the spoon, keeping it all moving and keeping it, stopping it from thickening up. And the large intestine is like the lid, keeping the fluids in, keeping the steam from escaping, but also allowing you to obviously take it all out. So in very simple terms, with food, we want foods that's moist, not drying, and nice for the stomach yin, and appetizing food. We produce about a litre of pancreatic juices and saliva and all of these things. So we need a lot of stomach yin. We need appetizing food that makes our mouth water. We need lots of digestive herbs and spices, lots of probiotics, unsuitably cooked food to help our spleen, qi and yang. We need some bitters, some moving herbs and spices, some greens, some alliums, some onions, garlic, all of that family to help keep the spoon moving. And we need plenty of fiber, plenty of movement to help the large intestine. If the kidney yang is flagging, we also need some heating spices. I often, when I'm giving people recipes, which I'm constantly giving my patients recipes, it's a bit like a recipe cooking club with the odd needle thrown in. Stir-fry sauce, I always teach them in terms of the 5 flavors. So you need some sweet, you need some spicy, you need some salty, you need some sour, and you need bitter, which normally comes in terms of greens rather than in the stir-fry sauce. So here's my basic stir-fry sauce. Is some garlic, some ginger, a bit of Sichuan pepper to give it a bit of that kind of, give this spleen and kidney yang a bit of a boost, some soy sauce and some stock, a bit of sour, some rice vinegar or lemon juice, some sugar, and then some corn flour to thicken it up, give it that nice silky texture. And corn flour, like, you know, the thickening stuff. Corn's an interesting word. It's a bit like the grain in Chinese. It kind of, corn means the main grain of your area. So in Scotland, corn used to mean oats, and in America it's maize, and in England it's wheat. And obviously, being English, you know, we should win and get to choose which one it is, but it means different things in different. Anyway, that's my sort of basic stir fry recipe. And I also use the 5 elements, especially when I get my Stroudy patients in, to teach them basics of cooking a good soup. So you need the flame, you need the oil, you need the alliums, you need the liquid and stock, nice flavor. You need your vegetables and greens, and then you can go around again and you can add your spices and your root veg. So a 2-minute introduction, and then on to sort of stabilizing the shen and feeding the center. So filling the belly and nourishing the earth. In Tai Chi, we talk about 2 states of mind. We talk about Shin, where the heart and mind are active and we're in our thoughts. And we talk about Yi, where we often think of the Yi as like concentration in Chinese medicine, or ability to focus. In Tai Chi and Qigong, Yi is very much about being present and mindful, being sort of in being in the best state that the mind can be in. So we're going to have a look at some earth cooking methods. We're going to have a look at the importance of regularity, the sweet flavor and how it gets used to nourish the earth. And we'll look at some plants that grow in the earth. So that's the plan. So the stomach likes moisture. We know about this. So we think of cooking foods with water. It's a good, best thing for the earth element. So steaming food, lightly boiling it, stews, soups and casseroles, porridge and congee, and soaking really helps as well with grains and pulses. So if we want to strengthen our earth element, and one of the things I love about Chinese nutrition is it doesn't just look at the food, it looks at the big picture again. It looks at the context in which we eat the food, and it looks at the way we cook the food. And these are all seen as being important, which I don't think always comes across in more Western nutrition approaches. So the stomach hates dryness. So what do we mean like that? Well, crisps are dry and salty, and dry baked goods like cakes and biscuits. And somebody did tell me this, and of course I had to try it, that Pringles are flammable. So generally speaking, we don't want to eat things that are flammable. Car upholstery, sawdust, Pringles, crisps, these are not foods that are going to be good for our stomach. So yeah, stomach hates dryness. We can say if it's flammable, we probably don't want to eat it. Or if it's excessively drying on the system, we probably don't want to eat it. So a quote from the Su Wen, eating and drinking, there should exist this lovely character here, regularity or moderation. So this is actually the character for bamboo at the top, and it's the nodes of bamboo. So it gives this image of like the way bamboo grows in its nodes, of things being regular. And I love the kind of simplicity of that. So the nodes of the year are the 8 festivals that, like when we do our change of season treatments at the start of the equinoxes and solstices, and the nodes in between them where we start spring and summer, and all the harvest festival and Beltane and all of those are the 8 nodes of the year. So these are really important. So our meals act as the kind of nodes of our of our day. So for me, that's about sort of stable blood sugar and regular meals and proper breakfast. So I'm always nagging my patients to eat with that sort of nice regularity, even if it's bad food. This is where I would start. So my students were horrified when one of my patients got recommended a chocolate croissant for breakfast. But I think just more important than what it is getting this regularity back again. And the best snacking is no snack. People always say, like, what's the best snack to eat? What's the most healthy snack? And the best thing is that your blood sugar is stable enough that you don't need to. If we are snacking, it's, why is it at night? Is it when we're stressed? Is it when we're bored? Is it a reward? Is it, why are we doing it? So another thing I'm always doing with my patients is looking at the sort of bad habits, or looking at the habits, let's not call them bad. I always think of the stages of that, of like, the first thing is awareness. So often I get people to do like a few days food diary, and I don't know how many of you do, but I don't really at this point give it that much importance. I'm just trying to make them aware of it. And the second is insight. So getting patients to look at, okay, why are you eating at night? What is it about? What are you, what gap are you filling? What hole are you filling? What's the habit? And then try and encourage some new behavior around that. So give them some alternatives, give them, or maybe awareness is enough. And the most important is the acceptance of relapse and moving back. And we'll talk about this again when we come back to meditation later. But to support patients in that they're going to slip up, and that's okay. They can just come back again is really important. Okay. So the sweet flavor. Sweet flavor is pretty much all the food that we eat. So grains, legumes, meat and dairy, everything that we eat has some degree of sweetness and taste. The sweet taste is like earth squared. So the sense of earth is taste, and the flavor of earth is sweet. So it's kind of the earth squared. So that's why it's at the center of everything. It's a bit like when you go for a walk in the woods. I always think that's the most relaxing place to walk, because the color is green and it's like wood squared. So the sense of wood is vision, and the color associated with wood is green. So when we're in a green environment, we're walking through the woods, it's like more relaxing place to walk than anywhere else. So that's why, for me, sweet is so important. So what does sweet do? Well, it tonifies. The warm and neutral sweets, the basis, are kind of staples, if you like. They support the qi. This is important because if we're deficient, we often want qi without all the stuff that goes with it. So this is our patients that are craving sort of white goods and carby stuff, and they want qi without really having to do the hard work of digestion. It can cool and moisten. This is our cool, like our fruits and things like that, nourishing the yin and the fluids. But what we're interested in really is its harmonizing, slowing and relaxing nature. So sweet flavor, as well as tonifying the spleen qi and providing the basis of gu qi, it softens a stagnant liver. So we, it can harmonize. We use this in herbal medicine to harmonize a stagnant liver. We use the sweet flavor. Harmonizes a disturbed shen, so it can give us like center our shen. It can ground us, it can calm us. It can also moderate strong flavors. And this is like when you've made a sauce and it's gone a little bit wrong, the best thing you can do is stick a bit of honey or a bit of sugar in it. It just tastes better. It moderates the harshness of anything. If you've messed up a little bit, stick some honey in and it'll probably be okay. And I think this is a bit like how we can use the sweet flavor in terms of our spirit. If we're a bit cross or a bit frightened or a bit, whatever it is, if something's gone a bit excess, we can use a bit of sweetness and it brings everything back into a bit more harmony. So do I talk about that? Now, I said I wasn't going to get pulled into the small picture, but I have to get pulled into the small picture a little bit. So we look at some sweet foods that really help the Shen. One of them is oyster. It's neutral and sweet and salty and enters the kidney and liver. It doesn't enter the heart, but it has a very profound effect on the Shen. So saltiness descends and cools and moves inwards. It's got very high minerals, as we'll see. It's sweet, so it nourishes and harmonizes, and it's neutral, so it has a gentle nature and wide usage. So what does it do? It nourishes the kidney and liver yin and moistens dryness. We can use it for the usual kidney yin signs. Nourishes blood and calms the Shen. Here's what we're interested in. So it can help with anxiety and insomnia and nervousness and all of that. Tonifies the qi and the kidney yang, so used for exhaustion and sexual dysfunction. So it's, because it's neutral and sweet and salty, it can nourish the yin and the yang. It's wide function. Traditionally an aphrodisiac because of their shape. Well, I guess it might be 30 years of vegetarianism, I don't know, but I don't particularly get aroused when I see an oyster, but you know, everybody's different. Has a cooling effect on the blood by nourishing and moistening rather than by actually being cold. It's rich in some of these nice saltiness. It's rich in a lot of these some of these micronutrients, zinc, selenium and iron. So iron and calcium I think of as like blood nourishing. Zinc and selenium more sort of kidney and jing nourishing. It's high in vitamin A, it's very high in B12, manganese. It's rich in amino acids that increase levels of sex hormones, and it's, of course, zinc is important in testosterone, so maybe that is important. It is, the filter feeders can suck up, they can kind of filter a bit of toxicity, so you do have to be careful if there's toxins around with oysters. So I really don't want to get stuck here because you get pulled into the really small picture, and then people focus in on that as well, and it's usually not terribly useful. But selenium deficiency is linked to depression and anxiety. There's a study looking at selenium concentrations associated with depressive symptoms and negative moods among young adults. So there's some good reasons why oysters might be important for the Shen. The same with zinc. Some interesting research about the role of zinc in depression and psychosis. Collectively, empirical evidence most strongly supports a positive association between zinc deficiency and the risk of depression, and an inverse association between zinc supplementation and depressive symptoms. So there's some good reason, but you know, do we want to give people zinc, or do we want to get them to include zinc-rich foods in their diet? Well, for me, it's always the latter. Anyway. Poppy seeds. neutral and sweet, and they enter the kidney and stomach. The sweetness has a nice harmonizing, nourishing action, and again neutral, so they have a nice gentle nature. And they're seeds, and seeds tend to descend. They tend to be rich in magnesium and zinc and things like this, and have a nice gentle settling effect on the spirit. I must confess I don't use them a lot. The poppy seeds are very high in the B vitamins, and the B vitamins, like the spleen channel, the best ones are all the multiples of 3, so 3, 6, 9 and 12 are the really big shooters when it comes to, and B1 when it comes to calming the spirit. I can remember a patient coming in, and I asked her what supplement she took. She was anxious, and she said she took B complex every morning, and she kind of had this moment of insight and went, oh, it's probably not a good thing to have something every morning that says B complex, is it? Anyway, poppy seeds, I don't use them a huge amount. I do like to cook up some breakfast bagels, and I use them for them, and I do use them in a korma recipe. So if you haven't made your own korma, it's really easy. You chuck everything into a blender and add it into your curry. I'm using cashew nuts here, but you can use cream. But cashew nuts, especially if you pre-soak them for a while, they're a really good creamy alternative. A couple of teaspoons of poppy seeds, and then your spices: coriander, cumin, turmeric, garlic, cardamom pods, obviously the inner bit, not the outer bit, or else those are tough and horrible. Bit of chili if you haven't got too much heat, and some fennel seeds and cinnamon, bit of ginger. Blend it up into a paste with water, and off you go. You've got a really good korma. You've got these lovely nourishing cashew nuts and some calming and centering poppy seeds. It's the detail stuff again, isn't it? So B vitamins, in particular vitamins B1, 3, 6 and 9 and 12, I'm sure that's what I just said, are essential for neuronal function, and deficiencies have been linked to depression. The other thing that poppy seeds were high in, as well as magnesium, was manganese. So manganese and mental health is also interesting. A lot of these, like selenium, a lot of these minerals are getting depleted in our soils, and we're not. When you buy foods, you can buy organic food, which tends to be better, but not always. But it's hard to know how much of these you're actually getting in your food. Anyway, low zinc, copper and manganese intake associated with depression and anxiety symptoms in the Japanese working population. So I'm whizzing through these, that's not that important, but if you want to have a look at the studies, they'll be on the slides. Back to the classics. After all of that, focusing in feels like much happier territory. So toxic medicinals attack the evil chi. This is from the Su Wen, the Simple Questions. The 5 cereals nourish, the 5 fruits assist, the 5 they're nourish, by the way, this is the same as our yang sheng, to nourish or to nurture. So these are our supportive role. 5 fruits assist, the 5 meats boost or enrich. This is, if you're a herbalist like Buzhong I Chi, this is the E, boost. The 5 vegetables fill or fulfill. And the qi and the flavors combine and are ingested in order to supplement the jing and boost the qi. So the implication here is combined in the right combination. So the right combination of the 4 qi, the temperature, and the 5 flavors supplement the jing and boost the qi. So the importance of, this is some of the connections, and this is, I'm not going to talk about this apart from to say that it's quite interesting, like what was considered a grain. So they like their millet, not glutinous and non-glutinous millet. wheat and barley, but also beans were considered a grain, so they were considered part of that that nurturing. So grains are getting a bit of bad press at the moment, I fear, and if you look in sort of Chinese medicine nutrition books, they're the good guys. They give strength and endurance, they give calm and balance at a Shen level, especially some of them. They stabilize blood sugar, they give fiber for the microbiome. Ling Shu 16 talks about the taking in of grains as being the most treasured thing. So in Chinese nutritional therapy, meals are usually built around grains, but grains seem to be the current kind of bad guy of sort of nutrition. Looking at this study on the microbiome, this is stuff that warms my heart. It says a whole food dietary composition approach versus isolated nutrients is far more likely to augment the clinical value of microbial psychopharmacology. And at the end, it forces an even more assiduous clinical consideration of the importance of healthy lifestyles. So again, we want to get our patients to eat pumpkin seeds and not take zinc supplements, because yes, we need the zinc, but we need to support our microbiome with which I think the microbiome is really, for me, the enzymes and the microbiome are what combine to be the spleen's yunhua, the spleen's kind of transforming, or certainly the transforming, not less so the transporting, but that spleen qi, the center of it is enzyme activity and microbial activity. So wheat, I always say that wheat is a bit like me at school. It's not bad, it's really good, but because it hangs out with a lot of really, really bad people, it gets into a lot of trouble. So I think most of the problems that people have with wheat, not all of them, but most of the problems that people have with wheat is that all the other stuff that comes along with wheat. And if you give up wheat, you give up most of the junk food and most of the bad food. But wheat is certainly overeaten, and we'll see why. It's sweet, it nourishes, harmonizes, calms, it's cool, so it's a bit moistening, so it can aggravate phlegm and damp. So sweet coolness, remember, it's like fruit, it moistens the fluids. Nourishes the heart yin and calms the shen. Nourishes the kidney yin and moistens fluids. Tonifies the spleen qi, especially if you combine it with digestives and warming food, and nourishes the blood. So it's not much it doesn't do. It associated with the earth element and has a downward nature. But it is overeaten, and I'm sure you've had the experience of somebody that comes in and they have Weetabix for breakfast, and they have a sandwich for lunch, and they have pasta and a sauce for evening meal, and 70 or 80% of their diet is wheat based. So obviously this is not good, not good for the microbiome, not good for being overly dependent on it. Again, it's high in our vitamins. It's got all those good ones in 1, 3, 6, 9, not a lot of 12, not many plant-based things have. High in iron, so again, good for the blood. Oats are another one. These are warming. If you keep horses, you know what oats do to horses. You have to be a bit careful with oats that you don't overeat it, or else it can make you a bit frisky. This oats do again enter the heart. They're warm and sweet, nourishing, harmonizing, grounding, tonify the spleen qi and nourish blood. Excellent for deficiency. Excellent for deficiency and colds. So they're good for people that are recovering from illness, good for the young and the old, people whose spleen qi is a bit weak. Regulate the qi as well, help to calm the shen, help to drain damp. The kind of fiber in oats has been getting very good press for helping cholesterol levels. The high levels of beta glucans in oats have been shown, but again we've got a lot of our really good guys in here. Good for the blood, good for manganese, huge dose of manganese. So we saw earlier that was good for calming. Lots of these really nourishing minerals. So plants that grow in the earth, nature's little storage units. So we've got tubers, we've got roots, we've got rhizomes, and we've got bulbs. We'll have a little whiz through some of these. Tubers, the potatoes, yams, artichokes, sweet potatoes, they're the storage units of the plant. So they strengthen the spleen qi. They're kind of also the reproductive parts of plants, like potatoes. They have a nice effect on strengthening kidney yin and increasing milk production. They're really important tonics, and grounding, centering nature. So often they get a bit overeaten because of this, especially if you chop them up and deep fry them and put salt on them. They're one of the foods that made us human. So this is interesting. We always think of the change from Paleolithic man to and the change in kind of becoming human as being, certainly what I was taught at school was it was to do with men, and it was to do with spears, and it was to do with fire. But it seems like that's only part of the story. And tubers were great because they were, you could store them, and they could make up deficits in calories through the year. And there's this lovely theory called the grandmother theory. So grandmothers, in studies that have been done on indigenous people, they're the best collectors of tubers. And they're the kind of champion breadwinners, and their collection of tubers, which can then be stored, can help to feed the kind of multiple young. We're the only creature that has multiple dependent young, and grandmothers are the ones that make up that kind of deficit. So maybe what made us human isn't kind of men and spears, but it's grandmothers and tubers, which I think is a kind of nice image. Anyway, must stay on track. Sweet potatoes. So this is what they all do. They all have that in common, that they tonify the spleen qi, the kidney yin, help milk production. There are a few differences. Sweet potatoes are warming, so they also help to warm cold and move the qi. They're also red. They nourish the blood better than the other tubers. Yams enter the lungs and tonify the qi. Jerusalem artichokes, known affectionately in our house as Jerusalem fartichokes, also enter the large intestine. They have a high percentage of inulin, which is a prebiotic. And again, prebiotics, you can buy these now as fructo oligosaccharides, which sounds very impressive, but you're better off just eating a bit of artichoke or endive or onions instead. The true roots, this is my lover's carrot that I produced last year. The true roots, carrots, celeriac, parsnips, beetroots and radishes. So these all have a nice grounding nature. They tonify the spleen qi. The roots descend, roots are reaching down into the earth. So they tend to have a descending nature, especially the bitter ones, because bitter also descends, and to some degree, less so the pungent ones that are more moving. So carrots, excellent food for the lung and spleen, for building digestion, nourishing blood, good for vision with all that vitamin A in. Beetroot and celeriac are also a little bit bitter. And beetroot enters the heart and it's red, so it also has a nourishing effect on the blood. It's one of the best ones for calming the Shen because it nourishes and cools the blood, harmonizes the spleen. Celeriac is a bit cooling, so it's like a mild version of celery. It's like somewhere in between potato for nourishing the spleen and celery for clearing heat and cooling the stomach and liver. So it's a nice halfway. Parsnip, radish are also pungent, so they warm the spleen and the lung qi, but they also have a nice draining damp action. So they're a nice combination food if the system's a little bit damp. Radishes are a little bit different. They're the one that don't fit because they're cool, they're much colder and they clear damp and phlegm. They're much more of a clearing food, clearing heat and moving the qi. And there's a great proverb, Chinese proverb, that says, when the white radishes are ripe, the imperial doctors cry. Rhizomes are the creeping underground stems. So this is your ginger and turmeric. So these are great for the spleen and stomach, but because they're stems that go underground, they have to be very heating. They have to have all those essential oils in them to kind of stop them from getting gobbled up. And I've put a horseradish in with this because it's not a rhizome, but it has very similar functions, actually a root, brassica root. So they're pungent and warm and have an upward and outward direction, but they're great for the spleen and stomach because of their warming action. So they're great digestives and great harmonizers. I think they also have this, because they're rhizomes, they have this affinity to the earth element as well. They're good for drying phlegm, and because they're heating, you can use them to release the exterior for like wing cold. Turmeric's also a little bit bitter. It gets a lot of good press these days. People are drinking a lot of turmeric tea, and it's a great herb for not only warming and moving, but moving the blood. And finally, bulbs. So bulbs are the short underground stems like onions and garlic. They're pungent and sweet. Onions are warm and garlics are hot. They warm the middle jiao and expel cold. They regulate the qi and blood, so they're great movers. We had them in the beginning as our moving kind of herbs. They're interesting because cooking really changes them. If you think that onions are white when they're raw, and they're much more pungent and they have a much bigger effect on releasing the exterior, removing the qi, and if you slowly cook them, they become yellow and sweeter, and they become much more nourishing for the spleen, so much less moving to the lungs, much more nourishing for the spleen. And the same with garlic, so we can moderate it. Onions also very good for descending, so it's good prebiotic and it's very good for constipation. Garlic's a little bit harsher. So that's nourishing the earth. We'll talk a little bit about stabilizing the Shen. How am I doing for time there, Alan?
So we're just at 11 at the moment.
Okay, get a move on then. Yeah, good. I don't seem to have any questions or anything come through.
No, wonderfully concise so far.
Okay, I've either put them to sleep or overwhelmed them, but I shall keep going anyway. We're on the home straight.
Well,
so stabilizing the Shen, so calming the mind and calming the mind or calming the spirit. So we want some downward movements. We've already talked about how heavy things like nuts and seeds have a nice downward movement and a nice calming effect because of all those nice zinc and magnesium and manganese and other things in it, and clearing heat and agitation. So the bitter flavor is the best one for descending and clearing heat. It works on the heart, but also, just as importantly, a lot of bitters work on the small intestines. They really help with that, sorting the pure from the impure. And I think bitters are very underused. Some of my favorite foods are bitters. Coffee, tea and chocolate. I mean, what's not to like? Greens like lettuce, spinach, broccoli, those bitters that are in broccoli that George W. Bush apparently hates. The ones with stars are ones that particularly have an effect on the Shen. A lot of our staples are bitter, so buckwheat and rye and quinoa. I say staples rather than grains because most of them aren't actually true grains. Some vegetables like beetroot we talked about as being sweet and grounding, great for the earth, but also a little bit bitter, so nice descending nature and nice calming nature as well. A lot of medicinal herbs like chamomile, which is very good for calming the Shen, is bitter. And beer, of course, all the best things, and burnt and charred things. So you think like coffee, some of the bitter in coffee is about the caffeine and the alkaloids that are in it, but some of the bitter in coffee and chocolate and tea is in the roasting. So things that are burnt or roasted, it makes them in the same way that water, cooking with water, sort of has this habit, has this sort of bonus of making them more earthy. Charring or burning things makes them have more affinity to the fire element and to the spirit. Burnt offerings. So they have the effect of draining, reducing, cooling, clearing heat, and drying and descending. So clearing damp and good for full constitutions. So good for heart, heat, insomnia and restlessness, but also things like celery is good for high blood pressure, and cucumber for heat in the skin or the liver. And they drain damp via the bowels, so they're good for stimulating nice downward movement in the bowels. Good foods for full constitutions. So nice example of a bitter food is lettuce, which is bitter and sweet and cooling. Lettuce descends and clears heat, it harmonizes and calms and cools. So it's good for damp heat in the urinary system. It's also very good for heat in the heart, so you can use it for anxiety, restlessness, insomnia and thirst. It has a great calming effect. It's used as a folk remedy for insomnia. It's good for moving stagnant qi and stimulating milk flow as well, being sweet and bitter. It's great for unblocking. Interestingly, the sweets, you often see what they do by looking at their minerals and looking at the small picture, but not so much. This is much more about energetics than it is about minerals. It does have these bitter compounds in that have which unfortunately they're trying to breathe the bitterness out of lettuce. So you have to get lettuce which is really nice and bitter if you want it to be nice and calming. Again, the Romans and Greeks seem to find this some sort of sexual booster, but I think they found most things linked to some sort of sexuality, and the Egyptians were at it as well. So Anglo-Saxons, being much more sensible, called it sleepwort and recognized it as a nice calming food. So my 2-minute lettuce recipe for you, which is a nice yuk sung. My patients always say, I don't like tofu, and tofu is like, it's a wonderful food in Chinese medicine, nutritional therapy, but it is like a blank canvas. It tastes of nothing and it has the consistency of nothing. So you have to learn how to cook it properly. So here's a nice 5-minute recipe. Pack of tofu, mash it up, marinate it with soy sauce, honey, sesame oil. Get stir fry ingredients. This was what I happened to have in the fridge on last Monday. Chop it up fine, hot oil, add in the tofu, and then nice dipping sauce, some Shaoxing wine, some soy sauce, some ginger. Again, we're getting our flavors in, and then wrap up your nice tofu stir fry in the lettuce leaves. You get that nice fresh cold bitterness of the lettuce and the nice sweet hot filling, and then your nice slightly spicy dipping sauce. So one of my favorite lettuce recipes. And for some reason we seem to think that the only thing we can do with lettuce is chop it up with cucumber and put a kind of limp dressing on it and serve it in pubs as what passes for salad. But lettuce is great if you slightly char it, it makes it more calming for the Shen. It's great cooked. It's it's much more versatile than I think we give it credit for. So looking at bitter, tea versus coffee is interesting, because tea being more cooling, coffee being more heating, but both having strong affinity to the heart. Tea is my biggest vice. I can't really survive for more than about an hour without a cup of tea. It's bitter and also sweet and astringent. So astringent is a kind of subset of sour. It's like that kind of biting in your mouth flavor that tea has, especially the black teas. And its temperature's variable, and it enters the heart. So the more sort of white or green your tea is, the more it has theanine in it, which is a chemical which is getting a lot of good press at the moment for its sort of calming, but also other health benefits. That could be a lecture in its own right. More antioxidants and cooler. And when you get through to the more strong teas, the red and black teas, you get stronger, hotter qi, you get more caffeine rather than theanine. So this is more stimulating, this is more calming. And should point out, red tea is what we drink as black tea, and black tea is like pu'er tea, the tea that's very good for digestion. Going back to our eating and drinking, there is regularity or moderation. So we always start with yin and yang, and one of the things I'm constantly nagging my patients about is balance of sleep and rest. And my sort of way of explaining it is very simple in terms of yin and yang. I think of like huddling around a campfire. So at night, we want red light, like we're huddled around the campfire. We want to be cozy but slightly cool. We want to be everything to be quietened and dimmed. Get the parasympathetic system kicked in. And in the morning, we want the opposite. We want blue light. We want to be active. We want exercise. We want to kick in the sympathetic. So getting that balance between yin and yang in. So the wei qi in the day moving in the yang channels, kidney and heart working together. The jing sheng is vigorous at night. The wei qi enters the yin channels. The shen returns to its abode, and the zhi becomes calm. Again, shen and zhi used more interchangeably. And I think you're going to be let off quite lightly, because I could bore you for hours about this, but looking at sleep cycles I find really interesting. So these sleep cycles that happen over sort of an hour and a half, where we go into lights, sort of dozing off into light sleep, through into proper deep sleep, back into light sleep, and then into REM sleep, where we're dreaming and then waking up. And one of the best bits of advice I give patients is that if you wake up, like patients that are waking up but getting off to sleep quite quickly again, that's not really disturbed sleep. We're all waking up at the end of each of these sleep cycles. As long as you're getting off again, it's okay. And people have this idea that they need to be getting 8 hours of unbroken sleep. Whereas actually we wake up, we just don't usually realize that we wake up about every 90 minutes. And looking at this in terms of Chinese medicine is really fascinating, because like the M1 sleep where we're dozing, this is where the E is really active, and we get hypnagogic hallucinations. This is where you get all the like things. If you're not, sleep isn't good, you get those patterns running through your head, or you get sounds from the day going through, or repeated phrases, or when you get a tune locked in your head, this sort of thing. So it's the E is really engaged here. Light sleep is where a lot of memory consolidation and things happen. So this is again where the kind of Shen starts to shut off and the E is more active. In deep sleep, the Zhi gets really involved. This is where we do our growing and our repair and all of that sort of stuff. And it's where night terrors and bedwetting and things like that tend to happen, and the kidneys are really involved. And then of course, where are we going? REM sleep is when the Hun is really active. So this is really linked with creativity. REM sleep's reduced in depression. One of the things that REM sleep seems to do is remove memories from experiences, so it makes things less traumatic. So post-traumatic stress disorder seems to be a disorder of REM sleep, and this is, for me, this is really where the Hun needs to be treated and worked on. Anyway, looks like we're running out of time a little bit.
So we're at 11:30 now. It's up to you what you would like to do, if you'd like to go straight into questions, or if you'd just like to take a little bit more time. It's up to you.
Okay, well, it would be nice to maybe do a bit of it'd be nice to maybe do a bit of Qigong, and maybe it'd be nice to do a very short meditation mindfulness exercise, but maybe we should finish with that. So it'd be nice to actually do something rather than just sitting listening to me going on.
Grand. So it sounds like then it would be a good time for questions now in that case. So if people would like to be putting up hands in the chat box, come one, come all. Otherwise, if you're feeling very shy, you can always use the chat box directly rather than the raise your hand function. We did have one question earlier. Could you recommend a recipe with lettuce for insomnia? Now you did talk earlier, you gave the recipe for the tofu and lettuce.
Yeah.
Looks like that's a bit of a favorite of yours in that case.
Yeah. I think that like lettuce are the best of the greens for treating the Shen, but I think just getting more greens in is great. That bitter, getting more of the bitter energy into diet. So just getting people to include a lot more green. And I say I'm really much more interested in the big picture than the little one. So any of that that list of greens, the bitter greens, getting more of them into the diet will help the Shen. Lettuce is just the best of the bunch, so I used it as an example. But you can be, lettuce is great in. I quite often use lettuce in soups and stir fries, and I braise it as put like slightly burn it in a pan with some oil and have it hot. It's a lot more we're getting some good questions now.
Yes, quite. Just before we go to the next one, I will point out that in order to raise your hand, if you go to the participants box, that will either be go from the top to the bottom of the screen, or if you also have the chat box open, it will just be the top half of the screen. And on the right, at the bottom of that participant box is 3 dots, and if you click on that, then you can click raise hand. The slides for that Danny is using today will be going onto the BIACSI website on the Let's Talk About Anxiety page.
There's a lot more detail on the slides than I could really talk about, so I put the stuff on the slides so that you don't really have to listen. You can just read it at the end.
Grand. So yes, this is a good question that's come in. Isn't charring or burning food carcinogenic? It's a good question.
It is, and especially if you do a lot of charring of like red meat, which is already a bit carcinogenic. So you do have to be careful, and likewise with smoked food. But I think it's again it's about moderation. So slightly charring a lettuce, a lettuce is a very good source of antioxidants. So yes, you're changing the energetics to some degree, but we don't want to be eating, barbecued food every day, or having a lot of smoked food or preserved meats, because that becomes a problem.
It's an important distinction, isn't it?
Very good point.
Yes, quite. There's this question. Oysters aren't exactly an everyday food that lots of people eat. So would you recommend any alternatives?
Well, a lot of those seafoods have similar qualities. They're just not as good as oysters, but again, they're not really everyday foods, unfortunately, are they? Or maybe fortunately, if you're an oyster. But yeah, point taken. And people do love a bit of detail. They love to be told this is a great food that you can put in, and but the important stuff is always going to be the big picture. The where we kind of started off. If we give people one thing and they think if they do that, that's going to make a difference. Well, that's just not how our diet works. We have to change the balance, but I often give people a few sweeteners to help them. If they think that if they have a couple of ingredients that are particularly calming, that will make a big difference, it gives them a bit of incentive to carry on with the big picture stuff that we do.
Yeah, it's quite. We've got another lettuce themed question. You might get bored with all the lettuce themed questions.
I can't get bored of lettuce. One of my favorites. Yeah.
How silly of me. Of course you won't get bored. So we have one point that if you try to cook lettuce, some lettuce will just wilt and look rather unappetizing. Are you talking about any particular types of lettuce?
No, but when you taste lettuce, some of it is a lot sweeter, and if it's a lot sweeter, like iceberg lettuce, it will have a less calming effect. It's the bitters in it which are often bred out. It's a bit like sweetheart cabbage. It's had a lot of. Of course it's good, but you're better off with a cabbage which has a bit more of a bitter flavour rather than the sweet, because we want to. The reason we're interested in it as a calming food is that and the moving food is that it's kind of bitterness. But I take your point. But I quite often I quite often will make a stew or a soup, and I'll just add a lettuce into it, chopped up, and then it's pretty much like has the same effect as spinach. So yes, the texture isn't great, and if you want one with a nice texture, you have to get one which is quite firm.
Mm, grand. Okay. We've got another question. I have a sneaking suspicion what you're going to answer to this. Question: meals versus constant grazing. People's times advised eat little and often. I suppose this is a question of, do you favour regular meal times or constant grazing?
Yeah, I'm always aiming to get people to have 3 meals a day with a decent breakfast and an early dinner. But some people's blood sugar stability isn't up to it, and they need to have, you know, a diabetic, for example, would not be able to stabilize their blood sugar for that. So you need to, usually with a diabetic, they're having 6 meals a day, 3 meals and 3 snacks to stabilize. But my aim is always to get people's digestion so that they can just cope with, you know, their blood sugar is stable enough and their food is good enough that they can have 3 sort of more substantial meals. And we think, you know, if you think of a formula like Shangsha Yujunzatang, spleen, qi deficiency and cold, with a bit of damp and phlegm in, one of the signs of that is eating little and often, you know, so it's needing to snack or needing to have very regular meals, I would regard as being sort of slightly pathological. It might be that that's how somebody is, and if they're split, you know, if they're 90, I might not be in the business of changing that, but my aim would always be to have a more stable blood sugar. And people don't, I make myself really unpopular if I say this, I should be careful, but like smoothies, you know, they're great for spiking your blood sugar up because you're having a lot of free sugar, even if you're having relatively healthy smoothies. I'd much rather get my patients to put all those smoothie ingredients into a soup and have that for breakfast, where they'll get stable, slow release of blood sugars rather than straight into the small intestine and free sugars already there to go into the bloodstream and spike the blood sugar and start that unstable sort of bouncing of the blood sugar that happens.
Okay, that's an interesting point, and maybe as you say, it's a good thing we're doing this by webinar. If you feel that'll make you unpopular, because you can always hide behind the screen.
Well,
We've got
usually, you know, students get the chance to throw things or shout or scream. So this is quite nice, like having a buffer zone here. Because
exactly, all those students and their horrible behaviour in lectures.
Yeah.
We've got a few students joining us today, and I'm sure they won't agree at all. We've had another wonderful question in the chat box here, which I'm struggling to scroll up to. More people are becoming vegans. What are your thoughts? Can they sustain and balance, balanced and can they sustain this? Balance and nourish blood through their diet.
Yes, and 2 out of my 3 daughters are vegan, so it's been something that I've you know, fairly dear to my heart in terms of they're quite slight and getting enough protein and getting enough blood nourishing in is a problem. But yes, I think it can be done. You know, obviously you need to be very careful about B12, and you need to be very careful about iron, and you need to, you know, it's very, I think it's very difficult to be a junk food vegan. I think being a junk food vegan is worse than being a junk food omnivore. But I think I certainly treat some extremely healthy vegans that are, you know, that are quite serious athletes and you know, extremely healthy. They're not my most blood deficient patients, that's for sure. But yeah, diet is becoming very polarized, isn't it? And the, you know, I'm sure everybody's the same, but you have people coming in with like doing raw food diets or being vegan, or on the other end of the spectrum, the paleo diets, and the kind of this kind of grains are terrible, and it's really hard to maneuver through that. And you know, we want to keep people on board, we just want to get them balanced without, I think if you tell a vegan that they need to eat beef, or if you tell somebody that's really embedded in paleo that they need to be having some oats, you know, somehow we have to keep people on board and steer them, don't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yes, I guess, was the short answer for that one.
Right, yeah, exactly. And once again, that's one of these big picture things, isn't it? You've got to get the patient on your side, do whatever is going to be the best with them that they will do, because at the end of the day, if they won't do what you're suggesting, then that's not going to help them.
Yeah. And also, you know, one of the things I love to I haven't touched on here, but one of the things I love to teach is how to give people dietary advice. Because if you've got people that are very, you know, stuck on the small picture, and you give them very big picture stuff like cut out sugar, they don't get it, and vice versa. And if you have people that are very sort of internally referenced and you tell them what to do, they won't do it. Whereas if you get them to experiment on themselves, then they really engage with it. So I think a big part of our kind of success or failure in terms of Yansheng is giving the appropriate information to somebody so that they make the positive change.
Absolutely. So that is a brilliant point. So we are at 11:45 now, and we haven't got any more questions in the chat box currently. So I wonder if this is maybe your chance to get a bit of Qigong and meditation.
Okay. Are people keen to do a bit of a little bit of Qigong? I always think
a few nods. Seeing some enthusiastic nods.
Doing is more always more fun than talking about it, isn't it? Right. Let me see if I can get my PowerPoint back up in that case. Not that I'm going to use this too much, but yeah, I was sort of Tai Chi and Qigong teacher before I trained in Chinese medicine. So it's sort of where I started. And I've been doing some Qigong classes online. So I've had to kind of rethink the way I do it and teaching a bit more of it, which has been really fun. The Ba Duan Jin, the 8 strands of the brocade, is just about the most famous version. And over the years, I've learned 5 different versions of this, which are all very different. Some of them are sort of quite, they've all had similar threads. They've all had a couple of recognizable bits in them, but they've all been quite different. And I thought I'd share one or share a couple of bits of one with you that my Tai Chi teacher teaches me, which is the Immortal Family Ba Duan Jin. And the reason that I think these are interesting is that they all use acupuncture points as their sort of focal points, or they use channels. So they're ones that you can actually do in bed or sitting down or wherever you are, and they all involve sort of they're very gentle and very easy to teach. So I'll show you a couple of them. The first one is called Wash the Face and Beat the Drum, and it's really good for the brain. It's really good for the Shen. It's really simple. So you rub your hands together like so, and then you wash your face with the palms of your hand, going around your ears and down the sides of your neck, and you're loosely following the direction of the muscles, just stimulating all of the qi flow. So this is the washing the face bit, and then beating the drum. Now you're going to have to watch me for the whole of this, before you try it for yourself, I'll show you what I mean, because you're going to put your hands on your ears. I'm going to try and turn away from you. So your hand is going to go on your ear, and your middle finger is going to sit on the occiput, and then your index finger is going to bang down. This is beating the drum, and it's going to stimulate the area around gallbladder 20 and bladder 10. So beating the drum, really good for stimulating the brain, the bits of the bladder channel where the chi goes into the brain. So you put your hands on your ear, your middle fingers here, and then beat down like that. I'm hoping you can see me. Okay, so repeat that one 36 times. There's always weird numbers in these things, isn't there? But we do that one 36 times, so getting chi to the face. We'll do one right at the end of the exercise as well. This is called gushing spring and washing the legs. This is really nice. If you're an acupuncturist, you really get what this is doing. And if you're not, it's just a nice foot massage. But the gushing spring bit of it, I've removed my sock so that you can see. Oh, hang on a second. So you put your hand, the same leg, and you put your thumb on the inside and your index finger on the outside, so that you're in the hinge of your ankle, and so that you're stimulating kidney 6 and bladder 62. And then you take your palm on kidney 1 and you massage your foot. So you're getting your ankle to turn around. And as you do that, you're stimulating kidney 6, bladder 62, and kidney 1. And you're activating your ankle. So you do that. Now, again, weird numbers. You're meant to do this for 18 repetitions of each one. So you do it with one leg. You can do it sitting down. So grab hold of the ankle below, thumb on kidney 6, index finger on bladder 62, hand on kidney 1, massage 18 times clockwise and 18 times anti-clockwise, trying to get as much ankle rotation as you can. So that's the bubbling spring. And then washing the legs, you hold your leg up and you try and make as big a circle as you can. So you're circling your legs. You can do it sitting, circling your legs 7 times in each direction. So we're really trying to take our chi into our feet and lower legs. So you do 7 of those, 7 of those. So that gives you a little sample of the immortal family, Bhadwan Jim. My Tai Chi teacher sadly has Parkinson's, and he's, since the lockdown, he's been doing these every day, and he said that they've really improved his symptoms. He was amazed, and he's taught them for a lot, but never really done them, because he does a lot of Neigong, which is seemingly much more powerful. But he said stimulating those acupuncture points has been really important. Anyway, that's a little flavour of the immortal family Bhadwan Jin. We'll have a look at the 6 healing sounds. So when I started my Qigong lessons, I made a new syllabus and I gave it to my students, said, is there anything else, here's some stuff that we could do. Is there anything else you'd like to do? And a lot of them came back and said, we'd really like to do the 6 healing sounds. So I've been teaching this to a group and they've really enjoyed it. So we'll have a play along. So these go right back to Dao Hongjing was a great sort of polymath. He was a great compiler. He was one of these amazing minds, but he was a compiler. He wasn't an innovator. So they probably weren't his exercises, but he was the first person to write about them in the 5th century. And the idea is that there's for each of the elements, or for each of the organs actually, because there's one for the pericardium and triple burner, there's a sound, there's a color, and there's a movement. Now the movements came much later. These didn't come till much later in history, but the sound and the color. So you say the sound and you visualize the color while you're doing it. So the first one for the heart and small intestine is her. And her, it's like the start of a laugh. It's like you're just about to give a great big belly laugh, but you're not all the way there. So you're ha, ha. And it's not quite ha, and it's not quite her, it's her. And you might get a little bit of harmonic with it, or overtone that goes up into the buzzy head, but it should resonate with your chest. So you should feel it in here, but you might get some overtones that resonate up in your head. What you do is take a nice breath in, and then as you breathe out, ha. Now, you can voice these, or you can just aspirate them. So they can be or they can be fully voiced, and you can go ha, ha. And don't forget to visualize being cloaked in red. Ah, and the movement that goes with this, make a diamond shape with your index finger and thumb and push upwards and outwards. So, ha, ha. This is activating your upper dantian. Ha, ha. And the more voiced they are, the more they affect the physical level, and the more in your head they are, they affect more the spirit level. So aspirating them like is a middle way, just saying them in your own head, much more spirit level, and voicing them is the best, but that's more physical level, or all levels, I guess. So we'll just try one more. This is for the liver and gallbladder, and the sound is actually shu, but it's the sh bit that's important. And this is regulating the liver chi, releasing anger and frustration, and taking in kindness and assertion. So shh. So imagine that you're kind of deflating. So nice breath in, and then shh. You really want to feel your diaphragm loosening. And imagine nice green light. And the movement, you can link your hands together and stretch up to the side. So you're stretching all of your rib cage, and the sound is releasing off your diaphragm. And this one it isn't really voiced. You can put a shoo on the end if you want, but it's not important. It's the sh that does the business. So that's the sound associated with the wood element and the liver and gallbladder. I think we've probably run out of time for mindfulness and meditation. The last thing I will say is that it's great that these lectures are happening. I'm really glad to be here doing one, and the next one is 5-element acupuncture for mental well-being in the student population, feasibility and outcomes, interim results, practitioner experiences with Michelle Venter, and that's on the 6th of September. So that would be really good. If you can make it, that'll be great.
Grand. And bear in mind that sort of means we're doing a little bit of a break next Sunday. The 6th of September isn't next week. So if you all pitch onto Zoom going, where's the meeting? Well, it's happening on the 6th. I think that we've had some lovely positive comments in the chat box going through. It looks like you've gone down a treat, and I particularly enjoyed a few of your puns along the way as well. So
Well,
thank you ever so. Oh yes, go ahead.
No, just thank you for inviting me, Ella. It's nice to do it.
Thank you very much for actually being here to come deliver this talk to our members. We're thrilled to have you here. Thank you for the time you've given us today, but also all the work you've done to preparing the talk, making it so well structured. Those impressive slides have been just extraordinary. And your doing without doing attitude is really transmitted today, I feel. So thank you for what you've done, but the way you've done it as well. You've really given us a lot today. So thank you ever so much. So as I say, we'll see hopefully a lot of you in a fortnight's time for Michelle Venter's talk. And until then, I suppose we'll wish you a good Sunday. Bear in mind, you can come back to this talk on the BIACSI website. This has been recorded. The slides will be available on the website if you go to the Let's Talk About Anxiety page. So you can watch this as many times as you like. Fab.
Great. Thank you, Alan.
Everybody. Fab. We'll sign off. So enjoy your Sunday, everybody.